You're listening to Oneofus.net.
One of Us is a podcast and video network funded all but entirely by donations and subscriptions. We do accept pitches for audio-based or banner ads, but on a case-by-case basis. If you're interested in that, contact us at oneofusnet@gmail.com. With the amount of audio and video content we generate, it is expensive and extremely time-consuming to keep things running. Please go to the webpage oneofus.net and sign up for a subscription at $2, $5, $10, or $25 and get a ton of bonus content. One of Us needs and appreciates all your support.
Now, personally for myself, this is going to be very hard to be objective about just X-Men in general, and especially animated X-Men with X-Men 97 Season 2, because I love it. I love this show. This is one of the few TV shows in recent memory that make me cry consistently. So it's 10 out of 10. Thanks for listening. Really appreciate you guys. Please subscribe to Oneofus.net. Thank you so much. And that's it. No, we're going to talk about X-Men 97 Season 2. It was way too long. It should have been released the day after Season 1 ended, because I could not get enough of this goddamn show. It's so good. But with me today to talk about X-Men 97 Season 2, I have Owen.
Hello.
And I have Dom.
Well, 2 years is understandably so, because it's been a lot that's happened behind the scenes at Marvel between these two seasons.
That's true. And Red O'Hara, welcome back.
Yes, here I am.
So, where we last left the X-Men and all the characters.
Is that a good enough intro for you?
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Here I am. Could I have been any more obvious?
You should have just said simple? Present.
Yes, here.
Just like Xavier's school. So where we last left the X-Men was scattered throughout time. Cable and all the timey-wimey shit from last season spread half of the team over in ancient Egypt times, where, of course, at the very last second, they encounter a very young, how do you pronounce his name?
Saba Noor.
Thank you. Very young pre-apocalypse. And in the extreme future where he's ultra-apocalypse and he's killing everybody, the other half of the team. And for the first few episodes, we get to watch basically how they're encountering, at least in the Egyptian times, how they are trying to navigate. Like basically, each sides are trying to find a way to get back home. But they've been there for a hot minute because they all have new clothes and everyone's really cool looking. And but the past versions include like Professor X, Cyclops, Jean Grey, and who else is Beast and Rogue, I believe. And but they also encounter a very that's in the future. See, all this timey-wimey shit gets confusing.
I'll hop in here and clarify. So it's Cyclops, Jean, Storm, Wolverine, and Morpher in the future, and then it's Professor X, Magneto, Beast, Nightcrawler, and Rogue are in the past.
Thank you. I'm really good at this stuff. So, well, what's really interesting, I'd never seen this before, and granted, if you guys are more comic book nerds, then please chime in, but I've never seen a storyline where the X-Men are trying to, once they encounter Apocalypse before he becomes Apocalypse, they are kind of helping him along his journey. And one of the things that Magneto is also trying to do is like, well, what if we can change the course of history where he chooses good rather than evil? Because Magneto has definitely turned into a good guy. Still, gray areas here and there. But I now I'm just thinking about the Genosha episode. Fuck. Anyway, so but it's interesting, motivations from everyone, even from Rogue, who is encountering him as well. It's like, I really do hope you choose good, because love, even though people will leave you, is something that will always be there and can be a great motivation to lead a good life. And where you learn more about Apocalypse, where his love abandoned him, and I was like, okay, this is all really, again, very cool writing. And then in the future, Cyclops and Jean and the rest of the crew encounter a very young Cable, where Nathan, where he is now leading a whole like tribe of people trying to survive to fight against Apocalypse. I was like, okay, this is really cool. Granted, I hope this is not all we're going to have in the second season, which thankfully it's not, because of course Bishop and Forge are trying to like we got to get the team back to the '90s, and I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, let's go. So anyway, a lot of things that happened, but I'd love to hear from you guys here of what you thought, just general thoughts about season 2. Dom, how about you lead the way?
Well, it's interesting because obviously my relationship with X-Men as a property, I feel like it starts with the 2000s Fox movies, and then I also was a gigantic fan of the Ultimate run, which I believe was Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Millar. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that. I read that religiously throughout high school, and obviously I also watched the X-Men Evolution cartoon. I watched Wolverine and the X-Men, so I had a pretty healthy enjoyment of the X-Men before I even really knew about the 90s years. I was born in 97, so literally, ironically, right when this series is supposed to take place, today's
That's
obviously
awesome.
my birthday.
Okay.
But, so a couple of little funny coincidences there, but obviously I wasn't, my biggest source of skepticism into getting into this when it dropped 2 years ago was I'm like, okay, do I have to watch the original 90s show in order to appreciate this? And the thing that everybody said going into that season was, no, you don't have to. And then, so I watched the first season, I really, really enjoyed it, like a lot more than I thought I was going to, where I'm like, okay, like, this isn't necessarily the thing that made me fall in love with the X-Men. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of new characters I wasn't as familiar with. I'm not as familiar with Jubilee, with Morph. Bishop I really only knew from Days of Future Past because he was briefly in there, portrayed by Omar Sy. Forge was still a little bit new for me. I only knew him as like the kind of goofy computer tech kid that they introduced in X-Men Evolution. But I really enjoyed the first season a lot, and I was very excited to see where they were going to go with season 2. Then you hear the behind the scenes stuff of, Beau DeMayo fired by Disney, and that was a whole big public spectacle thing that he is still giving interviews about, talking about how kind of his vision of what he wanted for the show versus what Marvel wanted just seemed to differ. There were a couple of other speculative things as far as stuff that maybe happened behind the scenes. But so going into this season, it's kind of a little bit of a House of the Dragon situation, ironically, where the outside forces weighing in is already kind of not negatively, but it's skewing my view of what's going to happen this season. And while I didn't hate all of what happened, I actually quite enjoyed a decent amount. There's a couple really standout episodes. The second Apocalypse episode in the past of the two-parter episode from when they were in ancient Egypt really, really stands out. Overall, I will say that this season kind of reminded me a lot of Young Justice Season 4, where there's a lot going on. There's a lot new characters. I don't necessarily know how streamlined the storytelling is, and it kind of leaves off on note.
Interesting. Okay. I do. I think there are still solid episodes in this, at least from my perspective. I would say it feel like there are more filler episodes. Just like we need to get Wolverine's claws back.
A lot of side quest episodes.
Yeah, a little like side questing.
Episode, the Nightcrawler episode. There's a lot of side quest episodes.
But at the same time, though, what I think the show does still very well is it still builds the characters, even with these side quests. But Owen, what about you? What were like general thoughts about season 2?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Dom in sort of thinking the first season was something pretty incredible. I still think about that. Was it the 4th or 5th episode? The one,
Genosha.
Yeah, I think
we all think about. That's our Roman Empire, okay? Yeah, we all think about that episode. That was the moment
where we're all like, wow, okay, this is now like stepped up a level.
So, spoiler alert, just real quick to butt in. Like, Rhett and I are very old friends and close friends, and we texted each other after we saw that episode. I remember texting Rez, I was like, holy shit! And then all that Rhett texted back was like, I need time. But Owen, please continue.
Yeah, I mean, I still think that episode, and even the first season overall, is one of the best TV series of the last couple of years. And going into this season, I was very excited again because I just had to trust in the series that they knew what they were doing, regardless of what had gone on behind the scenes. But I agree. I think there are some high highs here, but also some sort of meandering moments where it feels like the build up to the sort of finale events feels a bit more stretched out. In terms of the side quests that we sort of mentioned, I think, yeah, I wanted it to be stronger. It's not terrible. It's still a very good season. It's just not as consistently strong as the first season. And I think that goes down to the plotting of the whole thing, where you're really thrown in at the deep end at the very beginning of the season. And that sort of story at the beginning is very much how the series sort of completes itself. But there are moments, I think, after the whole apocalypse flashback, flash forward two-parter, that sort of feel like, why are we doing this now when the last two episodes kind of set us up for how the series sort of ends, the season sort of ends.
Right.
But even still saying this, I mean, visually, this is striking. The creation of the X-Men in this series is just pretty incredible, and I think just goes to show that maybe the X-Men characters should just stay in the animated realm, because I think there's so much visually that can be done with all the unique powers that all these characters have that just can't be done in live action and keeps being done over and over again. I mean, we just this past weekend had the third generation of X-Men recast that's coming up quite soon, and that's within like my lifetime. And I mean I was born in the 90s as well, and whoever would have thought that we would be getting our fourth version of many of these characters here. But yeah, I think this is pretty strong. Not as strong as the first season, but certainly not something that I didn't enjoy watching every week.
Right. Now, for someone who was born maybe just a year or so after me, Rhett, we grew up watching the animated show back in the 90s and just like loving it for how hokey it was. I even remembered you were talking about this, so watching the first couple of episodes of the first season, I was like, holy shit, they're striking the tone, but it's elevated in some way from the original series, like just being almost just a direct sequel, like taking a day right afterwards. But then it elevates so much in like the third and fourth episode. They were like, wait, what's happening here? This is there's like real stakes going on. And then Genosha happens. You're like, holy shit, what the hell is this show? And then going into this season, we've talked about it here and there, but what were your general thoughts of season 2, Brad?
Yeah, like you said, you know, I grew up with the original X-Men animated show. I mean, really, that and Batman the animated show were like cultural like milestones for us.
Yeah.
Like an entire generation read comic books because of those two shows. So I think it's a very hard feat to deal with time travel when you're dealing with the X-Men, because good Lord, I've seen people try to explain Cable's entire story in the comic books, and it is one of the most convoluted, confusing things ever. So the fact that they were actually able to have Cable in here and have me actually kind of follow what was going on for the most part is an impressive feat. It's funny, I actually, because of this, I'm actually kind of diving into some of my blind spots when it comes to different eras of the X-Men comic book. I just started, actually I just finished, I should say, X-Men Redesign, I think it's called, which I know the creator of that, another situation where there's a creator who, but he's dead, so
been a couple of those in comics.
There's a few of those. But yeah, so he won't be seeing any money from me. The couple of pennies he would have gotten from me reading it on Marvel Unlimited, I guess. But with it doing like the retelling of the classic X-Men, it also has to address a lot of time travel stuff and has to like make that more straightforward, because it's kind of an issue that like manga really doesn't have to deal with, because you typically will have just like one creator owning something, but then when you have decades and decades of different storytellers with different priorities and different interpretations, it's a lot of shit to try to keep up with. So this is yet another interpretation that I think they obviously nailed it with the first season. I do agree there definitely are some pacing issues. Are we going into spoilers on this review?
Well, we not 100%, I would say.
Okay. I won't say anything specific, but there definitely are some things, like you said, there's like not quite like a monster of the week, but just like a plot point of the week where it's like, oh, here's this grand altering thing and it's immediately resolved, which made more sense back in the days of cartoons where TV shows weren't necessarily like constant long-term storytelling, but with it having this ability, and also the fact that we know, well, granted, I guess they didn't know if it was going to be renewed for a third and fourth season, but now that we know that, hopefully we won't have that issue with season 3, now that we know that season 4 is, I mean, nothing's guaranteed, I guess, but for all intents and purposes, we will have a season 3 and a season 4, and we will be having it next year and the following year, so we won't have to wait as long, which is nice. Overall, liked it. Not as much as season 1, but that's a very high bar to try to hit, so most shows, I wouldn't even consider it fair to try to compare it to that. Lots of fun.
I think the episodes that we're thinking of, to your point, and I think to everyone's point about the really the pacing of just the episodes themselves. I still think like there's 3 particular episodes that I think just kind of like stall out the car of the show itself, where it's episode 5 of the what's it called, Weapon X Lies and DVDs, which I think I was like, I can't believe they did that. Which is, again, it's still a fun, good episode. It's just like, oh, okay. And like just the point for Wolverine's character to get something. And then the next episode, Danger.Execute, where it brings back Polaris, which I thought was really cool, at least in the fold of the original X-Men team. And then the next one with Strange Land and Savage Heart, which I like. Again, all solid for what they are. It's just like they're smack dab right in like on the middle and the back half of the season. So you're just kind of like, can we get back to that apocalypse shit? That was really cool. Like, I want to go back to that, please. And because something extremely big happens at the end of episode 4, Rise of Apocalypse Part 2. And you're like, I can't, again, it's another thing. I'm like, I can't believe this show is taking these like huge swings. Now, granted, when we talk about those kind of things, it's kind of insinuating that people are dying, which, yes, people do, characters do die. But of course, in Marvel and X-Men and comics, no one is ever really dead, which people have talked about plenty of times. And especially in X-Men, I've talked about this with my cousin. He's like, has anyone actually ever stayed dead in Marvel? It's like,
Uncle Ben.
But I think to Owen's point, one of the things I think is so great about both seasons and just the show in general is that the animation is incredible. It definitely elevates the living hell out of the original series and just makes it just better looking. But like that and the voice actors are so great. It's like I just want to call out more than anyone else because she's so good. Lenore Zahn, who also congratulated Indy Navarrete to get Rogue just this past weekend as well for the 80th rendition of X-Men. But she is so good as Rogue. And I feel like this season is kind of like Rogue's season. What do you guys think?
It's tricky because I went back and forth as far as whose season this was, because basically the way that this season kind of sets itself up, it sets you up to think that, okay, this is going to be the Cable and Apocalypse season, because you have Scott and Jean kind of setting Cable on his destiny in the future. Then you have Cable getting X-Force is his team, or X-Factor. I get the two mixed up all the time. Which one
Force?
Okay, his is X-Force and X-Factor is working for the government. And that's the team that Jubilee and Sunspot joined while they're waiting for the X-Men to come back. And then you have the stuff that's in the past with, Magneto trying to turn Apocalypse towards a source of good, but still being a little self-advantageous for mutants there. And then obviously we all see how that goes. But then obviously it hits Side Quest Central once we get to the middle portion where it's like, oh, it's a Wolverine solo episode, a Polaris solo episode, where we get what was it? Strife is the impersonation of the Danger Room. I may be getting the name wrong.
Oh,
just Danger.
It's just Danger.
Sorry.
I think it's just
And
Danger.
then,
yeah.
And
it's
then
from the Grant Morrison run.
Okay, I knew it was from one of the runs. I couldn't remember which one. And then we have the Nightcrawler Colossus episode. And it gets into a little bit of like, okay, we're setting up like new characters for the team. And I understand that, but I guess kind of what was missing from the first season is the first season did such a good job, I think, of balancing out its vast cast and never making it seem like any one person was hogging the spotlight, which I feel like is a big problem that the movies had, obviously focusing so much on Wolverine that other major characters really didn't get as much of the spotlight. And I feel like that's kind of always been the trouble when it comes to adapting X-Men, not even just the presentation of the powers, but that how do you give each team, that this is such a big, diverse, unique team that's always bringing in new members and characters. How is it that you make sure that each person gets that single individual spotlight? You know, there's been so many different X-Men, so many different iterations of the team over the years, and I feel like this was the season that was kind of falling victim a little bit to that in a way that the previous season didn't. I don't know if it was just the showrunner change up or what, but I really just felt like there was just a little bit too much going on. And right when it started to focus up again, it's like, oh, Gambit's back, you know? And it's like, okay, well, we pretty much had already been set up for that from the previous season. And then it sets us up for a sacrifice at the end that should have hit really, really hard. Like for me personally, given that, I mean, Nightcrawler is my favorite X-Men, so when that happens at the end, I'm no.
Nothing that happens to Nightcrawler. Let's not go into extreme. Spoilers just yet.
Believe the Doomsday leaks as well. I'm like, oh great, I'm gonna have to watch my favorite X-Men die not once but twice this year. But regardless, that's just speculation. We don't know if that's actually happening or not. You didn't hear it here first, but regardless, that's a moment that should have hit a lot harder than it did, especially given how Nightcrawler is basically set up as like the moral center of the team. He's the one that's constantly pulling them back from, you know, their worst impulses and such, you know, constantly, you know, reassuring them like, oh, when they have a chance to do something crazy to potentially alter the timeline, but oh no, it could be a little bit too crazy with moral ramifications. Nightcrawler, you know, because of his Catholic nature, is always the guy that's pulling them back, be like, maybe we should take a step back, maybe we should pause here, you know. He's the one that's basically telling them like, look, regardless of what happens, like Gambit's our friend. We got to do what we can for him. And so when he pulls the sacrifice play at the end to make sure that Rogue and Gambit, you know, stay alive after all that, I'm like, oh man, that should hit a lot harder than it does, but it just feels so quick and brief. And you're like, oh wait, was this even well set up for? You know, so it's like it's moments like that that kind of like prevent this from being like a great season and just a solid season for me.
So with that kind of spoiler-ish.
Sorry. I figured we'd already got into spoilers.
And that's totally fine. And plus, this thing's been out for 2 weeks. Who cares? Yeah. But Owen, what did you think about at least like the sacrifice of Nightcrawler? Because I know how I felt, but go on, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was done well enough where it got the surpriseness that I guess they were looking for. But I sort of have to agree that I think the emotional sacrifice maybe was slightly lacking, and I think that's just that middle section of episodes really sort of stalled the pace. And then once you introduce Gambit back into it, you're sort of more invested in Gambit and Rogue. And I think just because based on the strength of the voice actors and sort of especially from the Genova episode where we were so invested in Rogue and her sort of the torturous experience that she's gone throughout both these seasons. So it just, it sort of felt like it was set up written wise just to be a shock, but it just didn't, I sort of agree, it didn't move me as much as maybe it wanted to. Maybe because also I don't have that sort of same emotional connection with Nightcrawler, at least in the episodes that, from what I remember watching. So yeah, it's an interesting choice. I mean, I'm not sure how much, because I'm not a comic book reader, so I'm not sure how, if that's a thing in the comics and sort of.
Yeah. I mean, assuming like most of the movies and everything else is just kind of like, well, we're taking bits and pieces and making our own story for the most part, and you know, whatever they want to do, taking a lot of liberties, which again, I'm like, fucking go for it. Like, you know, make your own thing. Don't just make a direct adaptation of something. Cause you know, like what you were saying in Red, it's like, it's all over the place. It's like, who cares?
I don't think they can make a direct adaptation of X-Men if they
even tried.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, well, what do they even adapt, you know?
Yeah. Just like a first issue or something. I was like, okay. It's like, so we have 50 movies lined up for this shit. But Rhett, now the correct answer about Nightcrawler's sacrifice. What did you think about that part?
Yeah, I mean, clearly it definitely was setting up the whole time, because it does kind of feel like it's Rogue's season, so it's like, oh, it totally makes sense for her to be the one that dies here instead of Gambit like last season. So yeah, it definitely kind of pulled the rug out from underneath me. It definitely hit me on an emotional level. I'm still a little confused as to why Nightcrawler had to be sacrificed, like why they actually would have accepted that. But regardless of the logic behind it, I mean, it's definitely, I mean, good Lord, of course, the most religious X-Men has to die for everyone else's sins. How appropriate.
Of course.
Which also, reading the old comic book, it's interesting because like Nightcrawler, he is religious from the get go, but they don't really harp on that. I feel like they didn't do that until after X-Men 2 because that was such a central part of the character. Well, actually, no, I take it back. In the animated series, they actually do have a scene where Wolverine has literally a come to Jesus moment where he's actually like rediscovering his faith because of Nightcrawler. But like, definitely feels like they were constantly harping on that, even like showing like the what's that called, the priest neck thing?
Oh,
the rosary. Or
not the collar, yeah.
Maybe it's just collar. Yeah, that's right. He does wear that.
Yeah, you can even see that under his. I forget what costume it was, but anyway, yeah. No, I like them harping on that because I can't really think of another X-Men that really dives on what their religious or lack of religious beliefs are usually. So, yeah, it hits extra hard.
I think I would argue that I think it does earn it because there are plenty of scenes, even in some of the other episodes, with like, especially more in the Dead Man's Hand when the undead Gambit comes back, and then Strangeland Savage Heart. There are scenes where it's in between Rogue and Nightcrawler. And so it's really setting these things up of what ultimately happens in the last episode that I thought it earned it enough. It did shock me. I was like, wait, what? Like, I can't believe this is like happening. I liked that. I thought it didn't necessarily throw me for a loop to where it didn't feel like it was unearned. Because it does ultimately kind of make sense, actually, with Nightcrawler doing this in the first place, like you were saying, Red, with, of course, the Catholic is going to sacrifice themselves kind of thing. And I thought it was so bittersweet. And of course, the whole team's like, oh, and his whole monologue that he was giving at the end of it, I was like, this is... Again, I think it speaks volumes to, like, even though that they lost, what was the original showrunner's name? Beau something?
Beau DeMayo.
Beau DeMayo. Yeah. Even though they lost him for whatever the reasons are. I've tried to look into it, and then I just gave up because I was like, who cares?
Supposedly it was because he had an OnlyFans account during COVID. I'm like, I don't know if I buy that. That's a pretty, even by Disney standards, that's a crazy reason to fire somebody, you know?
Right. And then, but that was my one fear about going into this new season, because the first season was written so well. It's like, oh God, is this going to have the same consistency? And I think it works more than it doesn't. But with that, let's go into final thoughts. Dom, how about you lead the way?
Yeah, didn't hate this season. I wouldn't say that it's one of my favorites. So like the first season made my top 10 TV shows of 2024. But also that I think that's also given to like what we were lacking in terms of content in 2024, given that was the year after the strike. But really enjoyed what I had going in. This year, though, it feels like is to me the year where it's like all of my favorite shows when they're coming back are just letting me down. Like this was kind of Legend of Vox Machina. That was my least favorite season. House of the Dragon. We're gonna get into that in a little bit. All the problems that I had with this season. Yeah, and it just feels like they were trying to push forward just like a little bit too much. I don't feel like this season necessarily had the time to breathe. This was also reduced one episode from 10 to 9. So, again, not the worst thing that I've seen so far this year, but again, not my favorite. I'm putting it right in the middle. I'll go like 3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm boring with my star ratings. I usually don't have the brain juice to come up with like creative ratings like that. But yeah, didn't love it, didn't hate it. I'm looking forward to seeing the Fox X-Men come back and all die again at Avengers Doomsday. That'll be fun to have one last round with those guys.
So it's like, let's kill him again.
Exactly, as if we haven't seen that enough time. But yeah, Marston will maybe have something to do. We got Kelsey Grammer and Alan coming back, so there's that. Get to see Patrick Stewart die for the 80th time on screen.
It's like it feels like it's like they really don't like him as Professor X. Let's get Christopher Abbott to do this. And how about you? What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a compelling season. Maybe not to the same extent that the first season was, but I think the opening and sort of conclusion for the most part to this season really held my attention. And as I said, I think the animation is pretty astounding and sort of calls back to the original animated series, which I watched sort of in retrospect. Obviously not at the time, just because I would have only been either not born or one. So yeah, I think this was a good enough season. The work of the voice actors is really strong, and I'm glad that a lot of these voice actors are voice actors and not just actors who we know their faces. I mean, you pointed out, but Lenore Zan I still think of the end of the Genovia episode as one of the greatest like emotional gut punches because of her voice acting, and I think she does this again in this season with a bit of comedy laced in as well. Also, I was very happy to see an apocalypse story done well after the seismic failure that was the live action version of Apocalypse. Which
don't even get me started on that.
Lord.
Oh, I'm still angry about that. It's been 10 years. I'm still angry about that movie.
Yeah. So this was a good season, and I'm glad we're getting another season, and I hope for future. I would hope that maybe more episodes you would be able to do these sort of like side quests alongside the sort of overarching story. Maybe make the episodes 22. I don't know, is that a crazy thing to say nowadays, is we make 22 episode seasons? Like, whoever would do that?
The 90s, baby.
Yeah, the 90s.
And the 2000s.
Exactly. So I think all in all, this was a pretty good season. And ratings wise, I think I'm going to go for a 7 out of 10. Give me just some fabulously bright costuming, whether it be a dark gambit, pink and purple, sort of like from the dead, or Rogue in her most celestial costume ever.
Right. Rhett, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, real quick while it's on my mind. Yeah, Rogue, it kind of had like the look of like, what if Rogue was Wonder Woman kind of thing?
Yeah.
Was I the only one that got those vibes?
Bit.
Okay, all right. Yeah, as a whole, I really enjoyed it. Again, maybe not as much as the first season. I guess I don't know if they've announced how many episodes the next couple of seasons will be. So if it's still just 9, is that what it was? 9 or 10?
This is 9 episodes. Yeah.
So I guess we'll see. I mean, they're adapting a lot of stuff, so I get like the kind of rushed pace, but then at the same time, I don't know. Just pacing issues in general are about the only complaint I had. As a whole, though, I do like seeing a lot of characters getting some of their flowers, like acknowledging Polaris's place. Like, she was one of, not the first, but one of the first non-original X-Men to be an X-Men in the comics. So it's nice to see her actually be a character that you give a damn about, because Jubilee has the line, and also Jubilee gets her flowers, which I loved how they did it. And I love that they set up to where it explains her training, so it's not just like randomly like, oh, now she's a badass because we want her to be. Like, they actually explain, like, she's being trained by Cable, of course she can kick some ass. When Jubilee has the line to X Factor to Havoc about like, oh, you guys have a telepath to get the answer out of me? Do you have that? Was it B-Ray Cyclops or something like that? And I love, because that's always what I thought about X Factor in the comics. It was just like, these are the C-tier characters. Why do I give a shit about them? Whereas X-Force is definitely way more interesting, because it's the original premise of it is that it was like the characters that, well, originally it was the original X-Men, but that's a whole other thing. But the idea of X-Force is that they are willing to take the jobs the X-Men would do. In other words, the characters that were willing to kill, which we have kind of hints of that in this cartoon series. So anyway, I can go on and on. Oh, I love seeing Grant Morrison stuff being adapted, because I feel like that and another canceled person, Joss Whedon, but his run on Astonishing X-Men was incredible. I'm glad I got to read it before we found out all of his stuff. 4, I fear what I do not understand out of 5. Sure, that works.
I like this a lot, but I think there are definitely pitfalls that the season falls into that I think we've all talked about enough at this point. And but still, solid writing. The animation's fantastic. The voice acting is just great. I also, Don, what you're talking about, I'm glad this is not a Wolverine show. This is everybody's show for the most part. Granted, this is a little bit more jam-packed with a few things. Honestly, I kind of loved it that they the show, at least the first part of this season, was definitely focusing a lot on Professor X and Magneto quite a bit. Ross Marquand as playing a professor. Yeah. He's great. And he's such a great impressionist in the beginning with. I remember seeing him on YouTube years ago doing insane impressions, and then he was all of a sudden on The Walking Dead. I was like, what the fuck? But he's just great as Professor X in general. And then I don't. Oh, and Matthew Watterson as Magneto. Oh man, that guy, he can fuck. He's so good as I mean, Magneto fucks, and like,
yeah, he definitely does.
Love
Yeah,
bringing back that one letter. I also, real quick, wanted to give a shout out to the other voice. We obviously talked a lot about Lenore Zan, but I wanted to give a shout out to the other 4 voice actors from the OG X-Men 97, that being J.P. Carliak as Morph, Cal Dodd as Wolverine, George Buza as Beast, and Adrian Hugh as Nightcrawler.
yeah, just too good. And but yeah, I think that all this shows that this is very promising. Even to what you were talking about, Owen, I was like, maybe the X-Men should just be animated. I was like, I'm totally fine with it because they could do so much more with this and be so much more out there, and they don't have to think about like the insane budgets it would have been for 2 separate storylines happening, one in the past and one in the future like this. And like, this would have cost $1 billion to make. And then this is an animated show and all makes sense. And I'm crying. I'm like, how the fuck did this do this? I really did enjoy it. I'm very much looking forward to what they do in the next couple of seasons, because I think we all assumed a few things, that someone was going to turn into something else, but they didn't do that, which I was like, okay, save that shit.
Seeds were planted. Seeds were planted.
Seeds
for sure.
were planted. But yeah, I still liked it a lot. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10 tarot cards that I was like, oh fuck, let's go. Yeah, there you go.